Good Monday morning, everyone. You are on LinkedIn Live, and it is the No More Mondays podcast. And Susan, my guest, who you're going to hear about in a second, and I are having so much fun chatting that I'm like, hey, I guess we got to go live now. So that should tell you what you are all in for. But again, I am your host, Angie Callan. This is the No More Mondays podcast. It is the show where we believe you can have a thriving career and or business and an amazing life on your terms. And it is my pleasure to bring you guests who not only prove that fact, but who have resources and advice to help you live and work more brilliantly. For all of you listening to this via podcast stream, I want to remind you that we do go live every Monday morning at 10 Mountain, noon Eastern via LinkedIn. So if you want this conversation as fresh as you possibly can get it, head on over to LinkedIn because we are live and chatting. So if there is one thing I love more than never-ending opinions about everything, it is all of my opinions about leadership. I love leadership. I have loved it since I was a teenager and attended a world leadership forum for 10th graders. And my natural passion for it has been reignited lately through some conversations, a speaking engagement I have, and even a previous appearance on my guest podcast where we talk about leadership. And that's why I am super excited for all of you to meet Susan Barber today. If you didn't catch part one of this conversation when I appeared on Susan's podcast, The Visibility Factor, go find it, check it out wherever you get your podcasts and tune in because it's worth it, as you're soon going to find out as you all get to know her. Susan shares my love of leadership, and she channels it into her work as an executive coach and a business consultant who helps leaders be visible, show value, and gain new opportunities. She's a coach, she's an author, she's a fellow podcast host, she's a speaker, and most importantly, she's a new trusted colleague in my network. Susan Barber, welcome to No More Mondays.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah, she and I have so much fun chatting. Like we were talking about football and all that, like just all these different things. And then it was like, oh my gosh, you have to meet this person and this person. And then it was like, oh my gosh, I guess we have to go start recording and let people hear us talk about all these things. So coming at us from the great state of Chicago, how's the Windy City today?
It's actually pretty nice. It's been a little cooler here, but I hear it's going to warm up again. So we'll be ready.
It is starting to feel like fall here in the Rockies. I was on a bike ride yesterday through Snowmass, which is pretty decently high elevation, and there's definitely some yellow topping on the trees. So peak foliage is probably 2-3 weeks away here, which is kind of a little crazy to think about already, but here we are. It's fall, y'all.
September.
And, this is just a segue that made me think of something. Fall is a really great time for a reset. I think the spring and fall are really great seasonal reset times, but also I think a lot of people mentally start to tune back into life, work, professional development once the kids are back to school, once Labor Day comes and goes, because we have a nice long run up to the holidays where it feels like you can focus on things. So this is a really timely conversation for all of you out there who want to kind of boost your professional development and your leadership skills, because Susan and I are about to be on a shared soapbox about leadership for the next half hour. So bring your comments, bring your questions. If you're tuning in live, it's going to be a fun half hour. Susan, I want you to give everybody a little glimpse into kind of you and how you think about leadership. I would love to hear what kind of your definition of it is in a way, and what does it mean in your world?
I mean, for me, leadership is all about the ability to influence others, because you have to be able to sell your ideas. You have to be able to motivate your team and inspire them. And that all comes from influence. So I think it was a long time coming for me to figure out who I was as a leader. And I wish I would have done all that work earlier. I kind of jumped into a management role without understanding all of that. And so now when I coach people, I really have them start to think about, who are you as a leader? What are your values? What are your priorities? How can you really share part of yourself with your team and inspire them to do great things like you're doing? And it's not easy to be a leader today, especially today, way different than even when I was leading. And I just want to have a lot of empathy and support for leaders, especially in the middle management area, because it's challenging right now to go through all the things that they're dealing with.
You really hit the nail on the head. The middle management is I think, a really challenging place to be. And we're going to talk more about challenges. I love how you gave us all a little teaser to something she didn't even know I was going to bring up later. But it is very common, and it's interesting to me in a way that I would say the corporate world or the business world hasn't really caught up to this issue around the fact that leaders don't always naturally rise into those positions and need some
Mhm.
sort of training in order to navigate and build the skills, especially when you're in that tricky middle.
Yes.
And I want you to give us a little bit of more into your experience and perspective, because Susan has some like legit chops on where she's worked and where she got this experience. So talk to us a little bit more about your time at leadership at Heinz Craft, and some of the things that you navigated in order to become an authentic leader.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting journey, right? I was a great individual contributor, and of course those are the people that you promote, right? And unfortunately, I just didn't get the paradigm shift in my head that I wasn't supposed to be the one doing stuff anymore. I kept doing stuff and I had a team. So I had this great title, but I was still trying to do my job and theirs because I had been promoted from within my own group, which is also its own challenge. But I learned a lot in that experience, and I learned how to build trust with a team, and that the way that I do things isn't the way that they're going to necessarily do things. But as long as we get to the same outcome, it doesn't have to be the same. And so there's a lot of letting go of your own control, I guess I will say a little bit, right? Controlling things and knowing how you would do them and letting other people do them. And it teaches you so much if you can do it. And I didn't do it fast enough. But once I got to what I call nirvana, which is allowing your team to do the work, you are there to help motivate and guide them and coach them. But your role is to add value differently as a leader. And it took me a long time to learn that. I had to learn how to ask for help. I had to learn how to manage up in a bigger way and influence other people in the organization to help my team grow. And my boss, who I took over her role at the time, she said, Sue, if you're not watching out, guiding your team, and thinking about where your team is going, no one else will either.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt like a little bit of pressure in that moment. Like, oh my gosh, it's all on me now. But it's so true because, if someone's not visible and is not talking about what their team is doing and no one knows what their team is doing, well, that's a recipe for letting that team go, right? That team's not necessary anymore. And it took me some time to figure that out. But once I did, it just changed the game for me in a big, big way.
And I love that you figured it out, right? You went through a process of awareness to know that there was maybe a skill gap or kind of a natural tendency there that you had to train yourself beyond. And that's also where the experience comes into play here in what you're doing in work today and helping people through that so they have a guide, because you can definitely fumble around when you're on your own. And you said something that really resonated with me because I, as an engineer, young in my career, realized even then the kind of almost pitfalls that exist in that ladder, because there is no more literal way to describe it than most engineers go to work and are meant to be personality wise, skill strength wise, individual contributors. However, in most cases, the only way to grow in your career is to take the traditional next rung of a ladder, higher titles, and start leading people. But they aren't naturally wired to do that. And that's where I think a lot of micromanagement then happens. Like you said, you're like, you still want to do this role that you've been used to doing, you've been conditioned to do.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden I have to let that go and manage somebody else who's doing it. I still remember this day. This had to be 20 something years ago, but I can put myself in this cubicle like it's happening. I was a civil engineer. So part of civil engineering is you draw CAD like software engineers code. And I'm sitting there drafting something, and my manager is standing over me telling me what commands to use.
Wow.
And what you said, Sue, is like so bullseye and I was like 24, 25, 26 at the time. And I'm sitting here going like, do you actually have to micromanage the commands I'm using? Or is it okay if I use a different command and get the same result? And that is what you said that I really wanted to highlight, because I think it is so important to realize different people will approach a problem differently. But if they get an outcome that is acceptable, and I'm using that word on purpose, that means you have achieved. It may not even be the outcome you want if it's not a black and white problem, but that's also why you've hired these people.
Right. And it may even be a better outcome, right? Because, I assumed I knew everything. Of course, that's incorrect. But in the moment, I had been in that group for such a long time that I knew too much. And so the other thing I did when I took over the next group is I purposely did not learn all their jobs at the level that I knew my previous roles, because that allowed me to step back and ask questions, right? That's what a leader should really be doing. And if you look at any senior management in any organization, right, they don't know all the details. So they have to ask questions. So I adopted some of that into my style of just asking the hard questions, having them come to me with solutions and ideas and talking to them about what they thought they would do. And it just changed how they showed up. It changed how I showed up. And I thought, wow, I really wish I would have learned this lesson earlier. But you learn it when you're ready. So
That's also very, and you are the resource you are now to others because of that journey.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
I'm going to kind of put you on the spot because the one thing I didn't let all of you know is that Susan and I play a little bit in the same sandbox when it comes to kind of like some career coaching with leaders and executives. And so yet it's another shared opinion that she and I could go and start opining about. I'm curious if you have seen any sort of paradigm shift in corporate America, for lack of a better term, around this idea of you don't have to know everything in order to lead people doing those things. Because I think sometimes people get really frustrated that they're looking at like a director level job where they're required to have like hands-on, do the thing, roll up your sleeves experience. And then they're like, but wait a minute, why do I only need to know how that thing impacts the bigger picture? What are you seeing kind of in the market and around that frustration?
I just had this conversation last week, which was so interesting because the person is an executive director. And you would say, right, that is a person who should be leading from a strategic standpoint, influencing all of that stuff. But they're being asked to do some administrative things. And I thought, are you kidding? And she said, no, they would like me to do this. And I said, okay, but that's not what your role is about. So that just shows you, like, sometimes you have people in leadership positions who are insecure, and not talking about her, but her boss, insecure, who don't know how to lead, who don't know how to motivate and influence others to get things done. And so instead, they put them on things that, I don't know, just makes them feel, stronger as a leader. Like, you go do that for me because I'm your boss and you're going to go do that. So I think sometimes it's coming from insecure management who doesn't know really what their leaders could be doing for them and supporting them and what they should be doing instead of what they're asking others to do. It is fascinating. I don't know. I try to advocate for as many people as possible to let go of all of the detail and use the questioning and coaching approach, because there's no way you could know everything anymore. There's just no way. There's
Absolutely
too much.
That's such a good point. I was actually going to say, what advice do you have for people in that situation? And you kind of gave it, which was the like letting go, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's perfectly fine to not know everything, because that, to your point earlier, about that's why you have a team. I have a team who's going to tell me all the ins and outs and all the details because that's what they're good at. And then I'm going to ask them the hard questions to get to a decision to help us make the best decision for the company. That's really what the goal is. And that's how it works in the best way, right? But we have a lot of, I don't know, unfortunately, there's some toxic workplaces, right?
Yeah.
There's some insecure leaders, and all of that contributes to someone not being able to grow and develop because they're being held down.
And I think trust is really important here. And we're going to segue to the book now, because I think this is the perfect place to bring up the visibility factor. I think trust is paramount in any relationship, and people forget how important it also is to a working relationship, just as if it were a romantic partner. And I think that if you like the things that we're talking about and some of the challenges or sticky parts of leadership today trickle all the way up to the top, right? So you can have C-suite who also micromanages things and also doesn't necessarily trust the high paid other executive leadership teams that they bring on board. And that isn't going to get you anywhere in the long run. So I think that's Susan and I talking to people who are in those seats who have the ability to relinquish control, build the trust, and empower their teams to do the things that you've hired them to. I think it's a little different if you're on the bottom and you're I don't know if I want to say victim to it, but if you are a little bit more of like a cog in that wheel, I think you have to advocate in up and like Susan said earlier, start influencing. So now I want to get into the visibility factor and some of the things around that whole piece, because there's two specific things that jumped out at me when I was reading the title. And that was the fear,
Yeah.
which drills exactly into what we're talking about now in the trust, but then also becoming the authentic leader. So let's dive into those and maybe start with the fear, because I think that's essentially this topic around like it's the counter of the trust piece.
Of course. Yeah. Let me share a little bit of background because I think it will help explain both of these concepts. So I was considered a top talent in my organization in IT. And I was supposed to be, getting ready for the next promotion. And when I met with a mentor, she came in and we were talking. And then in the middle of it, she said, Sue, I have to give you some feedback. And that's that moment of like, oh God. And so she said, you're not being visible. You're not showing up in the best way. You're not participating in meetings the way we would expect you to. And if you really want to get to the next level, you have to do something different because you're not going to get there the way you are now.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a kick in the gut to me at that moment. I'm going from a top talent to now, do I have a career here? What do I need to do? What do I have to do here? So I took the moment graciously and said, thank you for the feedback, and then left the room and thought, oh my gosh. And it stuck with me all night, all day. The next 2 weeks, I just kind of sat with that and thought, what am I going to do? And at the time, I was trying to find a book that might help me with this because, it was a little before the internet of today. And I couldn't find one. That was really what I was hoping for. Like, I needed a guide of what to do, how to do this, how to navigate this. And so I leveraged business mentors. I leveraged other mentors to give me some guidance. And basically what they told me is, you were hired to do a job, Sue, and you have to speak up. You, like what I just said for other people to do, right? At the time, I wasn't doing it. You need to speak up. You need to share your opinion because your management cannot make a good decision without you sharing that. And so that opened the door for me to realize that I wasn't doing it for myself, nor was I doing it for my team. So I feel like the trust side of this is trusting in yourself, honestly, because we are so conditioned to compare with others. How am I doing compared to them? Am I as good as them? Am I better than them? Or am I not better than them? And I was suffering from major imposter syndrome. I did not grow up with an IT education, but yet I was doing all of these IT senior roles, and I didn't realize in my head that I wasn't doing well. Everybody else said I was doing well. I just didn't trust that. So learning how to trust yourself and knowing that you can do great things and you don't need someone else to give you validation for that is huge, because when you let that go, you can just operate in the world in a bigger way and your confidence grows. And to me, that's where you get to be more authentic, right? I trusted that I knew what to do. I felt like whatever decisions I make, they may be right, they may be wrong, but we'll fix them later. And I didn't worry as much about things like I used to. So I think authenticity allows you to be yourself, show up in the best way, be transparent, talk about the things that are concerning you, talk about things in a vulnerable way, because that brings people to you. People are relating to that, and then they begin to trust you in a bigger way as a leader. And we've all had the ones that we don't trust. So it's really like you're setting yourself apart to be a trusted leader who develops your team. It's more of the unique thing in the world now. Unfortunately, I wish that wasn't true, but if you can be that way, it's great.
There's somewhere in there that I'm going to go pull a sound bite, because I absolutely loved what you said about trusting yourself and showing up with those strengths and kind of leaning into that. And instead of comparing yourself, finding the validation internally. And we could roll that up into an existential life, piece of advice there is find a way to love yourself, because then you can love others, which is so true in this environment, right? If you can embrace who you are as a leader, you show up completely differently. And now I'm just going to get super freaking fired up, because this is what I talked about. So for those of you that don't know, Sue, I think knows, I went to Nashville just a couple weeks ago and spoke to a group of marketing leaders about how to lead in today's world. And it was essentially how to be human, which drills down to one word: authenticity. And I love that you brought that into this, because it is how you overcome the fear and quiet the fear and overcome a lack of confidence or the comparison or the micromanagement. because you're not trying to be Angie as a coach, or Angie as an executive coach, or you're not trying to be Sue, author of The Visibility Factor. You're taking inspiration from people whose leadership or work you admire and that inspires you, but you take it and you are your own authentic self. It's so much easier to be that person. And people gravitate towards you naturally if you are that authentic self, which now we're starting to get into some of the challenges of today are more important today than ever. And I want to know why you think that.
I just think because there's so much going on, everything is happening at the speed of light, right? And it's, I think back to when I first became a manager, I had more time. I had more time to think. I had more time to plan. I had more time to develop my team. And I think the world we're in now just doesn't allow for that.
Yeah.
And I'll tell people, and they laugh at me when I say this to them, but I'll say, you really should allocate, let's say 25 to 50% of your time, at a director and above for sure, thinking, planning, strategizing. And they're like, what? There's no way I could possibly do that. My calendar is crazy. I'll say, then let's look at your calendar and see what you can get out of, because you should not be in every meeting. That's why you have a team. Delegate to your team. Go to meetings that your boss is in, or that you need to present in, or that you need to influence. But there's this feeling like, if I'm not there, then nothing's going to happen. Nothing will move forward. And then if you can empower your team, they are ready to do this. Empower them to do it. So I think that's part of it, is this a little bit of FOMO, right? If I'm not in every meeting, I'm going to miss out on the information. I'm not going to know what to do. I'm not going to be able to tell my team. It's just, I don't know if it's just because of where we are in the world with the amount of information that's coming into process. It's a lot. So I feel for everyone going through this. It's a lot to process in my own world. So I can only imagine what it would feel like. But that's part of why I want people to be able to advocate for themselves as leaders and talk about the value that they bring, the talents that they have, because your manager does not have time to be in every conversation with you, and they don't know what you're doing. So you have to find ways to get it in front of them.
We're kind of more distracted than ever, and also statistically more disconnected than ever. And it was interesting when I was doing research for this keynote I did at this event in Nashville. I found some kind of disturbing numbers around connection in the workplace, and it ties in so integrally to what you're talking about, because it is exactly the way you're encouraging people to show up and embracing the authenticity and empowering your teams to do the same and play in their strength, that is going to help combat the fears of increasing disconnection in the workplace and in our teams. I pulled one piece of data. You ready, Sue? I'm just going to say it to you, and then I'm going to let you respond. 64% of people polled in, and everything I pulled was from a pretty reputable, name recognized worthy source. 64% of people polled in one of the surveys I looked at would reportedly trust a robot over their manager.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Isn't that sad? That's so sad.
Sad is exactly the word.
Wow.
And I also think that's where authenticity comes in today, is because we are so disconnected because of technology. Technology is a blessing and a curse. We have to admit it. And I totally agree that there's so much more information now that you can't ever hope to know it or digest it or filter it. You have to have multiple people. But we're so disconnected than ever because of technology that people gravitate towards human authenticity more so than ever now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's the same reason, like, I don't know if you're seeing this too, but people are actually writing letters and mailing them again, as opposed to sending an email when they're thanking someone, or they're trying to reach out to people for more coffee dates or more things in person. And I know, with COVID happening, that kind of all got pushed aside and in the background, and people embraced, right? I can be on Zoom, I can be on whatever I want, and I can do meetings and speaking remotely, and that's great. But there's nothing that replaces, at least initially, the human connection of being with someone in a room, getting to know them, knowing what they care about, what's important to them. It just makes such a difference. And then after that, if you need to be remote, you can, because you've already got that human connection with them.
I think the big thing is only remote or virtual connection
Mhm.
doesn't fill the void. I'm an extreme extrovert, and so I realized very quickly that that was a missing link for me. But I would attest that even if you're a more introverted person, physical, real human connection and relationships offer something that we can't ever get remotely. Now, Sue and I have only ever talked virtually, and I don't know that our relationship is lesser because of it. But when we get to meet in person one day, because we will, it
Well,
will add another new layer to it. And that's what I think is people are starting to maybe rebound a little bit from these like wholly virtual lives, wholly virtual connection that I think may have been starting before the pandemic and was just exacerbated by it.
mhm.
Um, and the authenticity and the real trusting connections is coming out, because I'm also going to tie that back to something else you said earlier. Is all of that is really important for the validation of who you are without comparison, because we can all put whatever we want on our stupid Facebooks, right? And usually what we're seeing is only what people want us to see, or only the leadership wins, only the leadership accolades and awards that make you look at that leader and say, oh my gosh, they're like the perfect leader. I have to be just like that. And now you start comparing and questioning your skills when you could just be like, hey, cool. I'm sure they've had some challenges getting there too.
Right. Yes, because they have, I'm sure. Right? It's like putting people on a pedestal and then keeping them there. And when I talk to people in organizations, I'll say, I know that you're on an org chart, right? That you have people that you report to. However, what if you could just for a minute dispel the belief here that that person's way above you and they're just someone who's equal to you? Could you have a conversation with them? Because that conversation is going to be so much more powerful if you come at it from a place of, I'm an equal with you. Your ideas are going to be better. You're more creative, more innovative. It's just all the pressure of, oh my gosh, that person's a VP. I'm talking to a VP. What am I going to say to them? I don't know what to say. All of that stuff gets in our head and puts a lot of pressure on us. It kind of puts us in fight or flight, and we just can't think then. So it's something I'll have people do just to see what happens, right? Let's experiment. Let's see what happens. Try it with somebody, who's just one level above you and then two levels above you, and then see what happens. But I know when our company split from Craft, the big version of Craft, into Craft and Mondelez, I was on the Craft side, and it actually opened up for me to be able to meet with anybody in the organization. It was much more bureaucratic before, a lot of companies
Mhm.
are, so that makes sense. But I felt very free to talk to anyone. And so when I was starting our Women at Craft Employee Resource Group, I went and met with an executive director and said, hey, actually executive VP. And I said, hey, I'd love to have you sponsor our group. It was no big deal for me to do that. In the past, I would have had to, get permission
Yep.
to make that happen. So I think there are opportunities to be able to speak up, to have different conversations. You just have to let go of the story, and that, you were talking about fear earlier, the fear of, I'm not good enough. I can't have that conversation with them. I'm not at the right level. If you can let that go, you can have a much more powerful conversation. And the goal is that they see you in a more powerful way, more valuable, more talented. You can't do that if you're hiding behind everything else.
The you deserve to have a voice is maybe a good way to kind of
Yeah.
tie that into one. And I think that the bureaucratic structure and hierarchy that created a lot of that kind of feeling, or some of it's actually true,
Yeah.
right? That, oh, I don't deserve, I don't have a voice. No one will listen. Even if I do, there may be repercussions if I go and advocate for myself or something I believe in or present an idea,
Yeah.
right? In a way, I think the kind of autocratic corporate structure that led to a lot of bureaucracy kind of encouraged that environment. And I think some of that is changing. I'd be curious to see what your kind of observations here are. I think some of that is changing, maybe not super fast, but I also think it's going to have to change faster because younger generations aren't going to work in that super hierarchical, autocratic environment where they don't feel that they have a way to really contribute authentically.
100%. And they, many of them are doing little, side gigs right now. And they want to have maybe a corporate role, but they don't want to devote their entire life to just that corporate role. So maybe they want to work 4 days a week. and be able to do their side gig, on the last day, or they maybe want to do things differently or work different hours to support their family. Things are going to have to change because you're not going to keep those people. Those people are not going to want to stay in your organization if you must do this and this and this and this way. It's just not the way they are thinking, right? They want to work for a company that has purpose, that they can make choices, that's flexible, that still allows them to grow and develop. I will tell you, there's a lot of people who are in Gen Z who want to do great things.
Yes.
But unfortunately, they have leaders above them who struggle with these people coming in who know a lot, who can do a lot. And I don't think that they're necessarily threatened. I think they just don't know how to manage them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they tend to give them busy work, or they tend to say, you know what, just take a look and research this for me and come back to me, which is fine, right, to do the research stuff. But they can do so much more, so much more. And so if you just give them a chance, guide and coach them, they could actually be a huge help to you, instead of just saying, well, just build out that presentation for me. That would be great. And then you change the entire presentation when they give it to you because you didn't actually guide them in the best way to give it to you the way that you wanted it.
I shouldn't laugh at this, but this is like such a classic micromanagerial leader thing to do, right?
Exactly.
Is okay, oh good, I kept you busy for 3 hours. Now I'm going to take 6 hours to do what I could have just given you feedback and done and then trained for the future. Because it does take a little bit more time at the beginning to train is a, because it doesn't mean bend everyone to your will, but to get everybody on the same page. But busy work is going to push those people out the door. It's not going to keep them engaged because it's not purposeful. And to share another statistic that I found while pulling the thing about the robot and others, younger generations actually do value purposeful work, meaning, satisfaction, and connection over big titles and pay raises, which is going to be really interesting in 15 years when there's no C-suite sitting around. But that will be the thing you and I talk about in 10 years soon. But this is exactly it. Companies used to have the upper hand when it came to, well, employees need to fit and work this way. But now the workforce is like so large, demanding, and the younger generations are going to have this big influx into it. You're not going to be a company who retains top talent or tracks top talent or innovates if you're not bringing those people in the way they want to work and engaging them so that those big ideas and all the information in their heads useful.
Right. I mean, there just is going to have to be changed. And I know people don't want to hear that maybe, but it is.
4-letter word, Sue.
I know it's the future. I mean, just imagine if you cannot get anyone to come work at your company because all the people, what is it, like 12,000 baby boomers are retiring every day. 12,000. So who's going to be left? Because Gen Z and millennials and then, Gen Alpha, which is coming, at some point, is going to be the people who run your company. So are they ready? No, probably not, because we're not helping them get ready. And so we have to focus on how can we get them ready? How can we help them build stronger skills, develop them, get them ready for the future? We can't just hope for a miracle to occur. It's just not going to work that way.
Something just clicked. And and it's perfect because I want to give everybody some practical advice on how they can do exactly that. But before I hand it over to you for more words of wisdom, you said something that really connected to me, is that it's really about getting them ready for the future. And I mean the future as in 5, 10, 15 years down the road, not the future this year. Yeah. Right? It's not just about let's make sure you hit your performance goals and the company hits their targets at year end this year. And I think in the past, that's really what it was, right? It was a shorter length of time was the future, or a shorter mission around coaching somebody to a specific thing. Whereas if you think about the pace at which the world is changing, it's almost as if the coaching and the preparation and the development we do with our teams has to think out that far and keep up with it, so that Gen Z and Alpha are prepared to be executives in 20 years, because they don't naturally have those interests, desires, or tendencies, but they can be coached there. It's just not going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
there was like a big cool like thought process around that. Like, yeah, it's no longer just coach your team to work in the team. It's coach your team to be who we need them to be in like 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
So on that note, what advice do you have? I love 3 pieces of advice, but you can give as much advice as you want to.
Excellent. Well, I got this advice from someone when I became a director, and it was great advice, and I use it so often that I think it could be helpful here. If you are a leader of a team, you got there because you were a superhero, and now you no longer have to be that superhero. So put your cape in the closet and give your cape to the people who work for you and give them an opportunity to be superheroes. Guide them, support them, teach them, but they are going to be the future, and you have to think about that. And so I love that you said that, because it's a long game, right? We have to start thinking about it strategically right now. How are we going to build these leaders? For the leaders themselves, talk about what you're doing. If you find a problem, solve it, talk about it. If you see a gap in the organization, there are so many, find one and try to figure out how to solve it. You might need help to do that. It's okay to do that. But talk about what you did, and talk about it in a good way. I'm going to say a strategic way. So I'll give you an example. So you could say, hey, I worked on those reports and I got them done for you. Okay, sure, you could say it that way. Or you could say, you know what? I went out and pulled the database and I looked at all of the data and I analyzed it, and I figured out that there was an easier way that we could start to pull this in the future. So I'm sending you an updated look at this new report, and I'd love to get your feedback. Right? It shows that I took initiative, that I did something bigger than you expected me to, that I'm giving you an opportunity to give me feedback, right? That's just a simple example, but we tend to diminish and devalue our work. And I would love for people to not do that anymore, because you need to talk about your work in the best way so that other people can see that it's great too. So think about, when you're talking to someone, are you sharing the best about yourself, the best about your work, the best about your team, or are you in diminishment? And that just sometimes comes from imposter syndrome of I'm not good enough, right? That's the fear talking. So let the fear go to the side, take action anyway, and recognize that you have a ton to offer. But if people don't see it, that's on you.
It's bringing the full value. Oh,
Yeah.
So the superhero thing was awesome, because I really, really wanted to have some amazing movie Batman analogy about like Michael Keaton no longer being Batman, but I'm pretty sure that like Christian Bale probably consulted him when he was the next Batman. And now somebody out there is going, oh my God, I can't believe you even allowed Christian Bale to be defined as Batman. But anyway, it's kind of the same thing. It's like the generational passing of the torch. And it doesn't mean you aren't still Batman.
Yeah.
It just means you're allowing somebody younger, fitter, smarter, and with a cooler car to be the Batman out on the streets now. That's such a cool analogy to think about how that looks in a work environment. But the diminishing thing, it keeps you from bringing your full value. And the example you gave is so perfect, because one is like, here you go, I did my homework, versus okay, I did my homework, but I actually found out something in doing so that could bring value to the company and change what we're doing.
Right.
Why would you keep that quiet? Unless you were in an environment that didn't provide the trust or the voice or the ability for you to bring that value. And if you're in that place, you should probably leave it. And if you're leading in that place, you should probably call Sue.
Yeah. Yes. You need safety, right? You need to feel safe. And that is something that all leaders can provide. Whether you have someone who is an extrovert on your team or an introvert who is a little more shy, giving everybody a voice and making it safe for them to speak up is really important, because there's a ton of introverts or people who may have had some bad experiences that have a ton to offer, but we don't hear from them, right? Yeah. Because they don't speak up because they don't feel like it's safe.
Or you got a loud mouth like me in the room. But it's true. I mean, and it's a good thing to have. You do not want 12 of me around a boardroom. Oh my gosh, please. The room would implode. But but that diversity is so that diversity is important to a team dynamic. But as a leader, you have to make sure you're aware of how it's working and know how to activate the different voices at the right time, so that people don't feel like they have to remain diminished or remain in a lane where they have limited value. And that's that kind of like safe, trusting place that a leader has the ability to create.
Yes.
Maybe I'm going to ask you for well, we haven't technically gotten to big tip number 3. So here comes 2A.
Okay.
What is like 1 or 2 small things a leader could do to foster that kind of safe, trusting, bring your full value dynamic?
I mean, one of the things that I talk about when I do workshops is, as the leader, give everybody a chance to, at the end of the session, right? Everybody gets a chance to say, what is your big takeaway from today's session? So every person gets to do it, but leave the introverts for last because they need time to process. They need time to think. And if you put them on the spot, they're just going to panic. So let them speak last, but then after the meeting, call them and say, I love that you shared that today. That was so phenomenal. I can't wait to hear what you share next week. You're building confidence in them that you see value in them. And that is where a leader has to spend time thinking about these things. You can't be in every meeting and think about that stuff. So if you can build that type of environment, everybody gets a voice.
I love it.
You might have to shut down some of the people who talk too much, but it's not doing it in a way that's necessarily bad. It's just giving everybody else a chance to.
Mm-hmm. And the doing it last is the doing it last is big because typically they're going to be the one that drops some genius bomb on everybody because
Right.
they've sat there and listened instead of hearing just to speak.
Yes.
And then that whole idea of like singling them out after, and I mean that in a positive way, goes into this idea of like individually understanding, knowing, and connecting to your team members versus just looking like I'm at a stockpile. Like each one of them is different motivations, different personalities, different strengths, different interests. And if you are a leader who can show like care for that and be attuned to it, it makes building that safe dynamic easier because you understand exactly how to activate each person and their individuality.
And those people are loyal to you for life.
Yes.
Because I had people that were on my team that I know would have walked through fire for me because I cared about them as people. And I didn't want them to work a million hours, and I would send them home and say, I love that you want to stay here, but you can't stay. We have to go home. We have to go, so they cared so much. And I think just knowing that I cared about them more than I cared about, obviously I cared about us getting our work done, but it was going to happen eventually, right? So it wasn't like that day was going to make a big difference. But sometimes you have to help people see what's the bigger picture, right? That they're more important, right? Their values, their families, getting out of the day job for at least an hour a little earlier would be a nice thing for your family to see you. So I think that's some of the stuff that a leader needs to be able to be very cognizant of and pay attention to.
There is, we all know more people leave companies because of managers than they do because of the company. It's something like 50% of people actually cite the manager as the reason for leaving a job.
Mm-hmm.
It's that high. What we're talking about here is not just retention and not being part of the 50%. We're talking about a legacy of leadership that you have the opportunity to build, to be the person that 10, 15, even 20 years down the road goes, I remember working for Sue in her first management role, and she saw me as a human, and I use that as inspiration and as an example of how I lead now. Right? You have the ability to have that futuristic long-term impact that we talked about needing to have in the business world today. But it's more than just the business piece. It's about impacting the humans who are in your team and seeing them exactly as that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Super important. In the world we're in now, I mean, obviously delivering, knowing the business, all of those things are important too, but you can make such a difference in a person's life. And sometimes I'll say stuff and I just say stuff, I'm saying things to them that make a lot of sense in the moment, but they'll tell me afterwards, like, I think about what you said all the time. And I'm like, okay, what did I say?
What was it? What was the genius of the moment?
Exactly. People one of my clients calls them Suisms. She's like, I have this Suism list of things that you've said to me, and I just go back and refer to them. So you could be doing that as a leader for your team, right? Just sharing even your own experience, right? They need to know that you didn't walk out into the world of corporate and become a director or a VP or a C-suite person. That just didn't happen that way.
Yes.
But we tend to not talk about our past, like, oh, I don't want to talk about how I screwed that up or that I made this big mistake that almost got me fired. they need to know you're a real person, that you're
Yeah.
a real human, and that you are not perfect.
Vulnerability is a huge component of authenticity and humanism, which I
Yes,
think at the end of the day, Sue and I both agree is the foundation of successful leadership in the current age.
it is. I just actually wrote that about an hour ago.
And I didn't know that. I did not know that. How's that for it? I love it.
We're very much on the same page.
Oh, so many things to come. And on that note, it feels like an excellent way to say that if you approach leadership or even your professional life as an authentic human who's willing to be vulnerable and relate to people as other humans, your visibility factor will grow. How's that to bring everything full
I
circle,
love
Sue?
that. Very well said. I love it.
Next time I get to do, if I ever get to be like a quote on the back sleeve of your book, that's what I'm going to write. No, I'm kidding.
Well, you might get that opportunity sooner than you think.
Subtle, not so subtle hints. I'm just kidding. This has been so much fun. Sue, thank you so much for joining me today and being on the, I'm not going to call it a soapbox. I'm going to call it a platform for the health of leadership tomorrow.
I agree. Love it.
How's that sound?
Love it.
It's always fun to chat with you. And I do want to remind you that everybody out there listening, that if you haven't tuned into the episode of The Visibility Factor where I am a guest with Sue, you should, because these two conversations together are maybe two of my favorite pairs.
Aww.
And I always enjoy a few minutes of Sue's wisdom. And I hope all of you did today. So Sue, thank you again one more time for joining us on No More Mondays today. This has been a fantastic conversation with tons of little pearls of wisdom and food for thought for everyone out there.
Well, thanks for having me. I would love to connect with anybody who is open to connecting on LinkedIn. And you can find me on my website or look up my book or the podcast. Would love to hear from you.
Perfect. We will include all of that on the show notes at nomoremondays.info. And obviously you can track it all down here on LinkedIn. We will upload everything to RSS feeds later today. If you want to go listen again, hello to all of you who are listening to the recording. Don't forget, we do go live every Monday morning on LinkedIn if you want to hear the conversations fresh off the presses. Thank you all again for joining me today. I'll see you next week for another episode of No More Mondays podcast.